TheBlaze Radio Network. On demand.
The best of the Glenn Beck program.
I'd like to have an adult conversation. If you are somebody who is like the media that just wants to throw Donald Trump under the bus and just can't separate anything, is that everything is bad, today's show is not for you. If you are somebody who thinks that Trump can do no wrong, today's show is not for you. Now, for the 70% of America that is left, that is just trying to figure out what the hell is going on, let's have a conversation. Every time I think about everything whenever I talk about Donald Trump, I think about how each side is going to pull out one thing, and that's all they're going to hear. And so if I had to write a memo for the left, or if I had to write a headline for the mainstream media, it would be this: Beck blames media. But that's that is a kindergartner headline. That is not a headline that is written by anyone who wants to understand. Let me start with the media. The media is so convinced that they are right. They are just so convinced that they understand. And I, in some ways, don't blame them. They've lived in a world where they've gone unchallenged, all the way from college. If you believe the progressive story, if you believe what most journalists are taught in school, well, who's throwing you up against the wall? Everybody you respect, everybody you've been around thinks the same way. So what are they going to teach you? You're right. They're just misguided or not educated enough or just flat out stupid. When you get to a point to where you think that other people who disagree with you are traitors, you're not going to listen to them because they're traitors. You're not going to listen to them because they have nothing to teach. And that means you have nothing to learn. Well, I beg to burst the bubble for the media. They have a lot to learn. And what they're doing today is, let's just assume, I mean, be really cynical. Let's just assume what they want to happen here is an impeachment of Donald Trump, at best. Because you have some people now starting to say on the left, where's the military? It sounds to me like they're calling for a coup. Let's just say that that's what they want to happen. They just want this guy impeached. They want him out of office. They want him to resign. They don't care. They just want him out of office. What you're doing is you're actually driving more people right into his arms. Because you've already sold the people that you were going to sell. And your behavior over the last 2 years has been so despicable that people who you could have captured are long gone because you're not fair. I mean, you'll notice that the Tea Party didn't start the day after the inauguration or the weekend of the inauguration. You didn't. No, that didn't happen. It was the policies. But you've made this personal, and I understand that. I mean, I can understand. He made it personal. He's made a fight against me personal. I haven't made it personal about him. Although I think I was going down that road because I was so angry and I just couldn't believe it. And then I realized what I would like to teach the media. You have to work with the world that you live in, not the world that you want. You are so desperate for the world that you want that you can't have it any other way. And that's not just Donald Trump. You did this before with Barack Obama. You wanted it so much that you were not going to let anything in that could possibly disrupt it. See, you think that Donald Trump is a racist. You think that Donald Trump is possibly a Nazi authoritarian, whatever. I can understand how you might view it that way if you want to do baseline thinking. But now that we have had a few years to watch him, there might be something more. There might be something different. For instance, I'm the guy who said, I think Barack Obama might be a racist. Now, that's all you focused on. You didn't focus on the next line where I said, it's not that I think he just has this deep-seated hatred for the Western culture. Now, you immediately took that line and made that into Glenn Beck's a racist, because what is the Western culture? Well, it's white. Well, that's what you were trying to say. I didn't believe the Western culture was white, but you did. I think Barack Obama did. And the reason why I believe that is because I understand what the radicals teach in universities. That it is the white man, it is the patriarchy, we're now in postmodernism where there is no truth. And the reason why we can't really take science, we can't use reason anymore, is because that came from the Enlightenment. So we don't use science. We don't even agree that there is a real universal truth. It's your truth. No, you're not a man. You're a woman, because today you identify as a woman. I'm sorry, but there are X and Y chromosomes. You're not white. You're black, because today you identify as black. Really? Okay, so if I identified, no. Well, wait a minute. Where is the truth? You said that I could identify. No, not everyone can identify. And the reason why they can say this with a straight face is because there is no truth. There is no objective truth anymore. It is all about the dismantling of the Western way of life. I don't see President Obama as a racist because I've spent a lot of time trying to figure that man out. And as I said, on the day that I just blurted out he's a racist, I immediately knew not that this was going to be, some big deal. Because I went back to the studios and everybody's blood had drained out of their entire body. And I said, what's wrong? And they're like, what's wrong? Did you listen to you? And I'm like, no, I was just thinking out loud. Stop it. I didn't change this because I thought it was bad. I changed it because I thought it was wrong. No, he's not a racist. He just has a real problem with the Western culture, the white Western culture. That's not racism. It's postmodernism. You, on the other hand, media, you refuse to look at the world in anything other than your lens, what you want to see, what you believe, you and all of your friends. Everybody else, they're morons. Because all of my friends, all of my coworkers, all of my professors have told me my whole life that I am right. So you didn't want to even recognize that Barack Obama sees the world through another set of eyes, the eyes of somebody who is an anti-colonialist. That's why he gave the bust of Winston Churchill back. It's not because he hated white people or anything else. He saw the Winston Churchill that you see if you are from India or that part of the world. And Winston Churchill was a monster there. He could not see the Western version of Winston Churchill, which is just as real. And because you didn't want to explain that, or you didn't even think deeply enough about it, you just know because everybody knows Winston Churchill, it was a killer. You didn't take the time to try to understand what that would do to the rest of the country, that weird philosophy. At least weird to somebody who grew up in America, let alone the West. You tried to normalize Jeremiah Wright and say that a man could sit there for 20 years and not be affected by that. That doesn't make any sense at all. Even Oprah Winfrey left that church and warned Barack Obama, I'm a racist? Well, what about Oprah? Because she said the same thing. And by your denial of any of this, it only fed the beast that something else is wrong. They're hiding something else. Well, as it turns out, yes, you were hiding pictures of Louis Farrakhan. You're still hiding a speech that Barack Obama gave that everybody who was there said would have been the end of his career. But you hid the speech. It happened in L.A. Everybody knows about it. You still haven't released it. I bet it wasn't as bad as you thought it was. But maybe it wasn't as bad as I think it was, because your absence on this has made it grow into a monster. Barack Obama wanted to change our traditions, the Western ideals, the images. By the way, I'm not saying anything that Michelle Obama didn't say. Barack knows to get there, we're going to have to change our values and our traditions. There's a lot of people that didn't want to do that. But this isn't about Barack Obama. This is just the setup that you've done it before. Now, maybe you knew who Barack Obama was. By the way, everything I've just said comes without judgment. You can believe any of that. And I can understand, actually, how Barack Obama did come to believe those things. I can understand his hatred for Winston Churchill. But I don't know if he could understand my love for Winston Churchill. You see, the ignorant would say, he hates Winston Churchill. He must be a bad guy. No, he grew up in Asia. And in Asia, they look at Winston Churchill from a different perspective because he was a monster there. They don't see the West. And they dismiss it just as we dismiss what he did in Asia. Both are wrong. He's both monster and savior. He's both. Now there's an elephant in the room. And you are so set that you are right. You can't see what's actually going on.
Glenn Beck.
Here's what's going to happen. Donald Trump is going to show a very strong hand in some way or another with Russia. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Because he doesn't see what he did yesterday the same way that I do, or the media does, or maybe you do. If you see what he did yesterday through his eyes, he didn't do anything about America. He did everything that was about the election and about him. It doesn't have anything to do with the ongoing problems with Russia. It has everything to do with the election. Now, here's why. I started with the media. You have to work with the world you live in, not the one that you want. And they want to believe that Donald Trump is this idiot, this racist, whatever it is. But he's not those things. He's not those things. Here's the main driving. I can't say this. I don't know what is making this so important to him, but he does. But somewhere in his life, he needed to feel important. He needed to feel loved or important. And it doesn't matter. I'm not saying any of this is a negative. I'm trying to explain how he became successful. We're all driven by something. In many ways, I was driven by my mom's suicide. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. It just is. But something happened where he needed to feel important and loved. And he's, in some ways, overcompensated for it. He's driven by his ego. And we all know this to be true, because if you say nice things to him, about him, he loves you. If you say bad things about him, he hates you. It's why he loves crowds, because they love him. It's why he hates the media, because they hate him. And I don't think he really understands entirely why. You want to make him into a fascist or whatever. He's not a fascist. He's not a fascist. I don't think he's a constitutionalist either. He's a businessman. He's a businessman. And he's a businessman that has built everything that he has built with his name in gold letters up at the top. Why? Because it's the best. Why has he married the women that he's married? Because they're the best. He wants everyone to know he has the best. So is he a fascist? No, he doesn't care. I don't think he even knows. If you asked him what a fascist was, what is the dictionary? I don't think he could tell you. If you asked him about the Constitution, how it works, what clause gives you power, he couldn't tell you. He's neither of those things. He doesn't think about those things. All men are created equal. Yes, when it comes to race, he deeply believes that. When it comes to everyone is really created equal, no. I mean, he believes in what he calls the racehorse theory. It's eugenics. I mean, he comes from a good bloodline. His uncle was the one from MIT that when Nikola Tesla died, he went in and looked at all the papers at the request of the government to see which ones were dangerous and which ones weren't. It was Donald Trump's uncle. If you even understand Tesla's stuff, that's a pretty good gene pool. So he sees himself in many ways the way the media does. I have the best education. I have the best language. I have the best answers. I know. The difference between him and the media is they despise the people. I don't think Donald Trump does. I think Donald Trump actually could hang at a state fair and be kind of comfortable. Media's not comfortable. He's a salesman. He's a salesman and a businessman. Okay, so what happened? What's the one thing that the media missed? Because of Donald Trump's worldview, if you try to look at the world through his eyes, he wasn't supporting Russia. And you can disagree with this all you want. But the fact is, the way Donald Trump thinks is the way Donald Trump thinks. You're not able to predict him because you can't think like him, because you don't know what really drives him. I'm the smartest. I have the most luxurious. I'm going to win. I'm going to win. I'm going to win. All right. When Donald Trump came down the elevator or the escalator to announce his presidency or his race to run, the media mocked him. I did. The media mocked him. Said this is a joke. This is just a publicity stunt. It may have been at the time. But the more people said that, the more I think he was like, oh, really? Really? It's a joke? The more people loved him and the more the media delegitimized him, the more he was set to prove them wrong. So here's what happened. Donald Trump first is called a joke by the press. Then he can't win by the press, including people like me. And then he wins. Now, what does the media do? The media does not accept the world that they live in. They can only accept the world that they want. And so they immediately go to delegitimize this guy. We immediately, before the inauguration, they're already protesting, and the media is already, with BuzzFeed, putting crap out. You know, he had a golden shower in Russia. The Steele dossier, Fusion GPS, collusion, Manafort, all of this. But what does Donald Trump hear? What Donald Trump hears is, you're saying that I'm not actually president, that I rigged the election. No, I was out busting my ass every day, and those people who are cheering for me are real, and their vote counts, and I'm the president.
Glenn Beck.
The only reporter that is actually doing work on the Amranaran, I can never say this guy's name right. I always feel like it's a joke. The guy who had Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the Democrats up on Capitol Hill, their server, something fishy is going on there. President Trump said that yesterday from the podium with Putin, asked, what's happening with this one? The only guy covering it is Luke Rosiak. And Luke, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So how's it feel to be a member of the conspiracy theory club?
Well, a lot of times the reporters criticize Trump and they say he's talking about conspiracy theories or any number of things they wind up saying about Trump. Trump winds up being right a lot of times.
Yeah.
And reporters wind up being embarrassed. And here, Trump talked about how a server went missing in connection with Imran Khan, and the reporters say, that's not true. Imran worked on the house, and there weren't house servers missing. Wrong. There was a secret Capitol Police memo that was urgent and marked urgent and said Imran Khan is a serious and imminent threat to the House of Representatives. We uncovered suspicious activity involving his servers he was logging into, and we marked a particular server as evidence, the House Democratic Caucus server. And as soon as he figured out that we were onto him, that server disappeared, and now that server is missing. So that's what the Capitol Police memo says, and no reporters have bothered to obtain this, and instead they write articles saying how, Trump is wrong, and these are conspiracy theories. And the reason they say it's a conspiracy theory is because the DOJ investigated this case and put out a statement. At least I won't say they investigated this case. I'll say they put out a statement claiming that they investigated the case, and they didn't find any wrongdoing. And so the reporters are relying on that without going back and saying, well, wait a minute, how did this investigation begin? And that's when you get into that Capitol Police memo I mentioned, a long investigation by the House Inspector General, and all this other stuff, which really amply demonstrates a severe cyber threat on Capitol Hill. And so they're very quick to cite Jeff Sessions when it's convenient, when they can use Sessions against Trump. But the way that any clear-headed reporter would have written this odd statement, this plea deal that the DOJ did with Imran Khan just about 2 weeks ago, they wouldn't have said, Sessions, debunked all this stuff as conspiracy theories. They would have said, Sessions is at odds with the findings of all these other investigative agencies on Capitol Hill. And those disparities have never been explained. So what we have now is, a lot of people talking about Trump yesterday. They said, what were they really talking about? They're saying he didn't take a cyber hack seriously enough. Well, it turns out that a lot of these Democrats on Capitol Hill didn't take the cybersecurity threat that was raised to them by the House Inspector General and other investigative entities way back during the 2016 election. They kind of made it go away. And they can cite now that there was some DOJ investigated and found nothing. Well, it doesn't work like that. You didn't have the benefit of knowing that, even if you believe that the DOJ did a thorough investigation, which they didn't, the Democrats had this IG report clear past their desks that said, he's this urgent risk. We've got data flying off the network. And they basically said, no big deal. It's probably fine. Let's not look into it. And so when you don't give them the benefit of knowing the future, which they couldn't have known, you realize that they did the same thing that they're accusing Trump of, or worse. I mean, they didn't care about a hack at all when it happened. So now, obviously, this is really just this Russia rhetoric is clearly just, it's political expediency. They don't actually care about cybersecurity or anything else.
Luke, this doesn't have anything to do with the Russians, does it?
No, that's correct. My reporting has focused on the House Democratic Caucus server, and there's been some confusion there because, obviously the House Democratic Caucus is similar in mission to the DNC, and it sounds similar. And basically, 2 days after WikiLeaks got hacked, Debbie Wasserman Schultz's IT guy got accused by the House Inspector General of hacking a similar group. So the timing of it and the nature of it and the people involved were all very similar. And, some people wondered, could he have been involved in WikiLeaks as well? My reporting is focused on what the evidence strongly, strongly supports, which is that there was this hack on Capitol Hill. And in my mind, that's a serious thing. After all, the DNC is merely a fundraising group. What we're talking about is government servers. Mm-hmm. And what this instance revealed is sort of a stunning hypocrisy where the Democrats didn't want – basically what I think happened is it would have been an inconvenient narrative. It really would have complicated the narrative for them for this guy to be busted and arrested 2 days after the DNC thing happened. And then you've got this – you would have had media stories about Debbie Wasserman Schultz's Pakistani IT guy being arrested for hacking the House Democratic Caucus server. No one's going to keep track of that and how it's different than the Russians and the DNC. So in my mind, what happened here is the Democrats were willing to jeopardize national security to secure this Russian narrative. So it's all about the perception and the way that this separate hack would have complicated that narrative. And in the end of the day, Democrats chose the narrative rather than, security.
So can you, for anybody who doesn't know about this case, can you in 3 minutes kind of summarize who this guy is, what he did with his family, all of that stuff?
Sure. So he started working for Debbie Wasserman Schultz a decade ago, and pretty soon he had his entire family on the payroll, and they were all making as much as congressmen in Capitol Hill. Very unusual for IT guys. The whole thing was just stank. And these guys.
Hang on just a second. Hang on just a second. They were making over $150,000. The average IT person on the Hill makes about $50,000, right?
Correct.
And nobody in this family had any experience in IT.
Imran Awan did, but the relatives he were putting on, they didn't even go to college. One of the guys worked at McDonald's. And so you've got members like Ted Lieu, who's a very outspoken liberal on these Russia and cybersecurity issues. They were putting these people who had criminal records, no cybersecurity training. They had massive red flags in their backgrounds, like $1 million in debts, and they would lie about it on their financial disclosures. And these Democrats exempted them from background checks. And the whole thing, it just was astonishingly reckless and negligent. And the Democrats couldn't have been worse on cybersecurity. And this has been going on from a decade ago until, through the 2016 election and into 2017. And so the IG found that they were funneling data off the network. They were logging into servers of places they had no business being. Some of the members fired them over the last couple of years, and they wound up logging into their servers anyway. Why would they do that? It's just really scary stuff. And so these guys they found out about this before the election, but they just kind of punted until after, which is that, what really concerns me is placing politics over security. And so they were kind of vague about what happened after the election, right after Trump's inauguration. They said, we're looking into something. It might be theft. I don't know what it is. It's very vague. So I started looking into these guys. This guy travels in Pakistan. First of all, he spends several months out of every year in Pakistan. He logs into congressional service from Pakistan. He's got an entourage of armed guards over in Pakistan that escort him, raising the question of how he has that kind of – why is he being protected by the Pakistani government? People in Pakistan say that he constantly brags about the power he has, the immense political influence. Basically he's really acts like he has all this power stemming from his congressional job. And, basically he's been in trouble his whole life. He's been accused of extortion-like behavior, blackmail type things, and that's what I'm really concerned about because he had access to 1 in 5 all the emails and files of 1 in 5 House Democrats. So he finds out that the Capitol Police are onto him, and he flees the country and he gets busted. He arrested at the airport with $9,000 in cash. Before that, he had wired over $300,000 in Pakistan, and basically they only charged him with wiring the money over. But if you look at the case in totality, you can see that he clearly knew that he was caught doing something so bad that he fled the country and was frantically liquidating all of his possessions. So 2 years go by, I exposed all this really serious stuff, and you can see the documents. This guy had multiple wives under Sharia law in Virginia, and both of them were saying they were being held in captivity by him, and death threats were controlling. His own stepmom said that he was wiretapping her, surveilling her with high-tech equipment, and extorting her. My God, this is the exact kind of behavior that you would be afraid of in an IT guy in Congress who's been found funneling data off the House network. And you look into his background, it can't be a coincidence. I mean, this guy has the worst background you've ever seen in your life. And so Jeff Sessions, managed to kind of string this investigation along without doing anything for 2 years, even as it got weirder and weirder. And at one point, Imran was banned from Congress. He came in at midnight into the House office building, took Debbie Wasserman Schultz's laptop, and left it in a phone booth. And on top of it, he put a little note that said attorney-client privilege. And so the Capitol Police seized the laptop because they realized that it was tied to him and he's a criminal suspect. And so Jeff Sessions has this laptop that Wasserman Schultz threatens the Capitol Police to give back. She desperately doesn't want it seen. And so Jeff Sessions basically they give all the evidence over to the defense improperly, and they say it's a mistake, and they do all this kind of things that indicate that they're just clearly trying to make this go away, working with the defense attorney, who is incidentally a Hillary Clinton aide. And getting back to that laptop and that note that says attorney-client privilege, well, Jeff Sessions prosecutors go, well, he put a note, we can't look at it, which kind of gets to the heart of the matter, this deep state, just the ludicrous nature of what we've seen under the DOJ and how it's really forming a pattern. I mean, the idea that when you have a Democratic staffer, you can put a Post-it note and say attorney-client privilege and they won't look at it, it's the most absurd thing you've ever heard. I mean, could you put a Post-it note on a gun after you shot someone and say attorney-client privilege and then they wouldn't be able to use it? So there are so many signs. At this point, it's become, to me, sort of a deep state DOJ issue, right in line with what we've seen with Peter Strzok, where the DOJ hasn't – sure, they put out a statement clearing him, and the media has used that to make the whole thing go away. But the big issue here is, how can they justify this investigation? Because it is completely at odds with documents, many, many documents that show crimes, including things as simple as their House financial disclosures, hiding all this money that they were hiding away in different ways, including a car dealership that took $100,000 from an Iraqi government minister.
Luke, I can't tell you how grateful I am that you are on the job on this. Keep nosing around and finding what's going on. I just wanted to have you on today to, thank you for your work, and also to let the American people know this is what the president was talking about last night. He is conflating a whole bunch of different stories into one, but this is a separate story and really important. What was happening with the Democratic caucus in the Capitol? How did this guy get hired? How did his family get hired? What were they stealing? What do they know? What's happening?
Glenn Beck.
Ian Bremmer. He is a political scientist. He is the author of Us Versus Them, The Failure of Globalism. And last week wrote an article for Time magazine, Trump and Putin will call their summit a success, but don't expect U.S.-Russia relations to improve. Welcome to the program. Ian, how are you?
Glenn, good to be back with you.
So tell me, how did things go yesterday, in your opinion?
Well, look, obviously this was not one of Trump's better moments, and I think even if you were watching only Fox News yesterday,
yes,
you saw that the coverage was on balance negative. Why do you not have your advisors in there? Why are you making equivalence between the FBI and the KGB or the FSB, the successor to the KGB? He clearly made Putin look good, and he did not come across as the president of the United States. But if you ask what actually came out of the meeting in terms of substance, Trump did not offer recognition of Crimea as part of Russia, certainly did not promise reduction of sanctions, nor would he be able to implement such, I think, if he did promise them. Didn't say that the U.S. was going to suspend military exercises in the Baltics or withdraw any troops in Poland, isn't reducing American defense spending, which is going up, isn't talking about taking troops out of Syria. In other words, all of the things that have led to a U.S.-Russia relationship that's pretty hard line and certainly in its worst position as it's been in decades, I don't expect that in any way to change, despite the fact that Trump individually clearly would like it to.
Yeah, I don't think, the people around Donald Trump know exactly who Vladimir Putin is, and his policies have reflected that. I really think, Ian, that this whole thing was him going over to stand with Putin, who would say, no, we didn't fix the election so Donald Trump would win. Because I don't think Donald Trump sees the difference between the social media hackers and the DNC hackers and all of the other things that are going on with Russia. He sees all of it as one big ball that says you're not a legitimate president. Would you agree with that or not?
I'm sure that's true. I think anything that implies that his electoral win was less than the biggest, most extraordinary
yes.
Win that we've ever seen is not acceptable.
Right.
And but there's also the question. I mean, he clearly is aware that the Russians were involved in hacks against the DNC and against the elections, and not just in terms of cyber attacks, but also disinformation, lots of Russians pretending to be American citizens, voters, and influencing people. And whether or not it flipped the election, I certainly have no view, and I'm even somewhat skeptical, but it clearly matters, right? In the same way that Trump spending money matters, and all these things we do matter for elections. And you have to wonder, with Putin saying, yeah, I wanted Trump, I didn't want Hillary, he said it yesterday, if Trump also isn't going over individually to see Putin and get any sense of, hey, what are your plans for the midterms? What are your plans for 2020? I mean, whether or not he's going to say that, he's certainly thinking about it.
So was this the disaster that the press said? Or some at Fox that said this was the greatest thing ever. What was this? How is this going to be remembered by people, not by history, because I don't, history is written by sometimes people I don't necessarily think get it. But how is this going to be remembered, Ian? Yeah,
I mean, I would argue that while it was a real win for the left, right, in the sense that they've been talking all this time about how Trump is in Putin's pocket, and he goes over there and he acts in an enormously embarrassing way that kind of shows that he's really personally deferential to Trump in a way that none of his advisors agree with.
Yes.
So, I mean, it makes it. So I think that if you are in the position of being a professional Trump basher, if that's what you do, yesterday was an awesome day for you.
Right.
But if you're actually trying to look at the broad sweep of where the world is going and saying what really matters, I would certainly argue the NATO summit's a lot more important than the Helsinki summit. I think that Trump's decision to pull out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, his G7 performance, just that in general, the fact that American alliances and multilateral institutions with the advanced industrial democracies are getting so much weaker. That was true before Trump became president, but Trump actively wants to break the EU. I mean, there are many presidents historically that have thought maybe we don't want a really strong Europe. Maybe we want a Europe that's a little divided, an EU that's a little weaker so we can have more sway. But there's never been an American president that wants the EU to go away. And Trump does. Trump actually believes that he would be better off if the EU were to break. And I think that is really, really wrong and bad for the United States.
So hang on here for just a second. You've been dubbed the rising guru in the field of political risk by The Economist. What the hell does that even mean?
I guess it means that a very wonky British magazine thinks I'm very cool.
Right. But in political risk, that means you can see what they think that you're pretty good at seeing what the risks are and how things might shake out, right?
Understanding how politics affects the markets all over the world.
Okay.
For example, the relationship between those things. Sure.
All right. So let's go back to the EU now. Yep. You just said, I think that would be really bad for us, and it could be very bad for us. But let's talk about it from the people in the EU, far as their sovereignty. I think there is this undercurrent of nobody trusts the media, nobody trusts their government. They feel that their government is out of step and erasing their identities, which is really dangerous because that leads to, for instance, this identitarian movement overseas, which quickly spirals into Nazism or extremism. But how do you solve this to where you can restore the countries and say it's okay to be France, it's okay to be Italy. We're just going to be together. But you can be Italy. You can be England. Is there a way to accomplish this, or is it really just jam it down the throat and hope that it works, or, riots in the street trying to break it up?
Well, Glenn, I'm very sympathetic to that question because the fact is that the momentum right now is with Trump-type solutions, and not just in the United States, but in Europe. Right. Even in Canada, right, with the election of Doug Ford in Ontario a few weeks ago. This is, you've got a whole bunch of people that feel like they have been forgotten. And the easiest way to rally them is to say, no, I'm going to look after you, and we're all Italians. Mm-hmm. And no more of these outside Libyans coming in. I'm going to close all the ports. I'm going to look after you, and we're all Germans. Mm-hmm. And no more Syrians, no more Muslims coming in. And Brussels, open borders, free trade, don't trust any of those people. The fact is that when Trump was over in the UK meeting with Theresa May and embarrassing the hell out of a sitting prime minister, the fact is that Trump is more popular in the United States than May is in the UK. I'm not saying that justifies it, but it is a fact. And one has to ask how that is true. Why that is true. Because if you're not going to address the underlying problems, as much as I would like to see the EU stay in place, I can't sit here and pretend that it's going to get stronger. It's only getting weaker. It's only getting weaker before Trump jumps up on it, up and down, tries to see if he can shake some more pieces.
It will collapse on its own weight if they don't address the underlying problems. And they just keep crying racism, when that may play a role for here and there. But for the vast majority, I don't think it is racism. I think it's multiculturalism, which is vastly different. And nobody is addressing the people's feelings, which only leads to trouble.
You're not addressing a lot of things. You're not addressing the fact that working classes in the United States and Europe have not seen their opportunities grow. In fact, they've seen them deteriorate while the top 1% and 10% are doing better. You're not seeing a response to people who feel like the country and their communities don't look like them, don't feel like them anymore, when they've been forgotten. Say, wait a second, you're going to bring...
Oh, geez, did we lose Ian? This is like the second time at this time. There you are. Okay. We missed the last 20 seconds.
So the idea that you have people responding to new folks coming in that don't look like them, don't act like them, but they're going to respond whether or not some of that's racism, and I'm sure some of it is. But nonetheless, if you haven't been taking care of the people that are already in your country, you can understand why those people would say, and you're going to let new people in?
Right.
I mean,
correct.
Turkish workers, educated with jobs in Germany, are some of the most virulently anti-new immigration, because they recognize that those new people that don't have the education and aren't going to perform as well in the economy, are going to seem to be expensive, potentially is going to poison the well by Germans against the Turks. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to see that. And then, of course, you have security issues where the poor people in these countries fighting as allies with the United States, and Trump doesn't say anything about their sacrifices in Afghanistan or Iraq or other countries. But the fact is that just like in the U.S., it's the enlisted men and women. Yes. It's the people, not the most educated, that are fighting in these wars that have been failed wars and very expensive. If you think it feels bad in the United States, imagine how it feels for allies of the United States that are now, pardon my French, being pissed on by the American president for not doing enough for NATO. If you were a member of one of those families or one of the people serving in those countries themselves, you have become viscerally opposed to these established governments as a consequence of that.
So does he help? Do the people over in Europe at all, or in England, because he is speaking for Brexit, does he appeal but at the same time repel? How do they perceive him?
There's a small group. I mean, certainly Nigel Farage, who had been, sort of the tip of the spear for Brexit, and now I think a Fox News commentator. But in addition to that, ran the UK Independence Party. He and many of his supporters think that Trump is useful and agree and align with this idea of draining the swamp. Even if Trump's not actually doing that, they like the message. They like the anti-political correctness that absolutely resonates, just as it does with the alt-right in the U.S., that resonates with a lot of people, a lot of young people too, across Europe. But let's be clear, Trump's biggest message that the Europeans are hearing, and the Brits themselves as well, is America first. And that's why, other than the Queen, you had a couple of the major royals, right, Prince Charles, Prince William, didn't even show up. That's an astonishing thing for a visiting American president, and it's because America First feels so bad, so contradictory to the special relationship that pretty much, I mean, so many of the things that Trump has done outside the United States are disagreed with by every major American ally, whether it's leaving the Paris Climate Accord or leaving the Trans-Pacific Partnership, leaving UNESCO, moving the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, unilaterally pulling out of the Iranian deal. Literally every American ally in Europe opposes those moves, and that's quite something. And that's a pretty broad feeling across European populations as well.
Ian Bremmer, thank you so much for being on, author of Us Versus Them, The Failure of Globalism.
Glenn Beck.
The best of the Glenn Beck Program.
Glenn Beck.
The best of the Glenn Beck Program.